Just say who you are on the record.
Peter Rushton, Internal Audit.
Ernie Hall.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Amy Demboski.
George Michaelis.
L.V. Gray Jackson.
Bill Starr.
Dick Trady, just an assembly member. I'm a part of this committee, but yeah.
I understand from summaries that there's a pretty good productive meeting on another audit plan stuff. And what I want to try to do is, and I'll guide Kate as soon as she gets here on that, is to not recreate as much as practical those conversations unless there's a strategy to where one builds on another. Amy, in just a minute, you can kind of summarize that. I guess you and Elvie were there from the leadership of the Assembly perspective with a proposal to tailor the audit a little bit more management driven and sort of that. And where I would want to see the conversation go today with this one is to sort of stay pretty specific to the question in front of us on the 750 as it relates to that. So I did actually talk to Kate earlier today, and she's sort of gotten that message. But if there's a relevance to the previous conversation, certainly mention it. But I didn't want to have the burden to recreate that with the 18 modules and all the things, the relationships that go into that management side of things. So I'm not going to do that today unless you think that it'd be helpful to do it.
I don't think so. I think honestly, the scope of work and everything that we have in front of us is pretty detailed.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what our conversation was about. We were fine-tuning that to make sure they could complement each other.
Right.
So I think this is fine. If anybody has questions, I think Ms. Gray Jackson or myself could answer them.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. So that would be the style. And Kate, if you could just go on the record.
Yes, Kate Geyer, CFO. Apologize for my tardiness. I couldn't be for the mayor's presentation.
We just had a conversation. We've been gaveled in since 1. We're really just talking about the need to probably not recreate the summary of the previous meeting. You held that under audit, Amy, or was that under budget and finance?
The previous meeting, for this, it was actually not a publicly noticed meeting.
Okay.
It was an audit committee. Yes, it was. It was an audit committee meeting. It was publicly
No, I'm talking about the scope of work that was developed was between.
The previous Friday's meeting, though, was held under an audit committee.
Oh, that one.
Yes.
I thought you were referring specifically to how this was developed.
No.
I'm sorry, my misunderstanding.
What we talked about, Kate, was you don't need to be burdened with recreating the summary of that previous audit committee meeting in terms of how that relates into it. We pretty much have the understanding of the management focus and where that focus would go. What I want to make sure we do is stay fairly specific to the question in front of the Assembly, which was postponed at the last Assembly meeting, to give the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth on where there would be things. I have a few, I don't know if they're questions necessarily, but hopefuls that you address what the deliverables look like, some of the time frames that make sense, and then sort of the interaction between who and how the audit would be conducted from a perspective of not adding more delay to already a tight time frame. So are you prepared, as we talked this morning, kind of to start, and then do you have a formal presentation, or do you just want to be interrupted?
I'm happy to be interrupted. I do better at the board, but
Okay.
I do
Well,
have
how about
some
it?
notes.
Again, my strategy on committee level work is to kind of get the job done. So if that means that you just got to blurt it out. If it gets to where there's people talking over themselves, then I'll start taking names. But certainly just chat.
Okay.
Okay, Kate, move us along.
Thank you. What we're looking at here, do we still have the drawing tools? What the Assembly is looking at is a $750,000. We turned it an audit. And the purpose of that is to have someone that's independent, that means not an implementer, which is, you know it as Peloton. They're called an SI. They're a system implementer. They take the code that's the SAP software, and they technically configure it based on what the Muni business needs are. So this is code, it's really just, it's a software. What happens is, this code, Muni and Peloton together collectively determine how this code should work for us. And we went through a big presentation, which I don't even think I could recreate it, because I was in the zone. But what we want to know is, of the probably 17 areas within this code, one of them is purchasing, accounts payable, projects, grants. We want to have somebody take a look at all the configuration of this code and tell us what's missing. Is it configured properly? Is it going to work for us? Has our testing been appropriate? Really, we're just doing a health check. The project has been going on for 3 years, and we need to know, is there
Right.
anything additional?
Dick has a
One
comment, a
question,
question.
Kate.
Yes.
Are they gonna be able to tell us what went wrong, if something went wrong, when Black and Beach were the SIs on this? Because we had Black and Beach originally, then we went to Peloton because Black and Beach couldn't achieve ignition on this thing. So is SAP gonna be able, if they do this, gonna be able to tell us what happened, whether it's Peloton or Black and Beach?
Through the chair, we're asking them to take a snapshot of where we are today. So they will likely say, you have the configuration of accounts payable is not complete. You have not configured this, and this that we need you to configure before you can go live. We're not asking them to investigate why. We all pretty much will know why, because the system wasn't completely designed under Black and Beach. The design documents are not complete. They're TBD, to be determined, in many critical areas. So we know the system wasn't designed thoroughly by Black and Beach when they did their, what's called a blueprint. What we need to find out is, what do we have to have in here that's critical to go live? And that's the picture they're taking. Mr. Turney.
Thank you, ma'am.
So what I've handed out to you is, I tried to clarify what this is. It's really a technical snapshot, if you will. They're going to look at the configuration, and they're also going to look at some things that I'm not so clever about. I understand accounts payable, and I understand logistics, and I understand general ledger, certainly. But Lance is here. There's also a lot, and Ann also, there's a lot that goes around the system, like how did you, what's your architect, how's your system constructed? Lincoln logs, how have you put those Lincoln logs together? So in addition to...
From a software perspective or a hardware perspective?
From a configurations perspective. So have you made the proper connection between, purchasing flows through accounts payable? So is your structure appropriate so that your workflow is appropriate so that someone makes a procurement and it's going to go through a workflow process and end up with an invoice being paid in accounts payable? That end-to-end design, is that done well? And Lance and Ann probably laugh when I start talking technically, so please feel free to jump in. So we have not only are we having them looking at accounts payable. If you look at this document, it says review area. We have them looking at that, but also how do they put the architecture of the system together. We have them focused on areas where we're currently experiencing some problems, and that is in grants. There's lower hours where we don't think there's, problem. We just want really kind of a health check. But where we know things might be a problem for us, we're asking them to spend some more time. And additionally, we are also going to ask them to reset our project schedule. So our project schedule is what tasks of the 6,500 tasks or 6,200 tasks, what tasks have yet to be done, and give us a brand new reset project schedule at a task level and tell us how long they think it's going to take to complete that task. So they'll give us benchmarks. I've asked them for low, medium, and high in terms of hours to complete those tasks. So from that, we'll be able to assess what our budget needs are to complete the program. We'll take, low, medium, and high, and we'll multiply it by a rate to come up with a task. And I believe the part of the management audit that's going to marry into that is the, what do I call them? The quality assessment review is going to look at those hours and look at our calculation for a budget and see how reasonable we are. So these are some tasks. The people who are sitting in the back, if you have specific questions, can tell you about what data extraction for PeopleSoft. That's self-explanatory. We really want someone to take a look at the challenges that we're having with data extraction for PeopleSoft. We talked about that, and I won't go over it unless you need me to, but we wanted someone to take a look at that to see if we're doing it most efficiently. We have, you'll see something called BobJ and BW. These are the reporting mechanisms that are coming out. We had software that we acquired back in 2011, but Black & Veatch never loaded it, never prepared our reports based on that. So that's the latest, greatest software. We should have already been on it. So we are going to go on it because it's what we want to use for the next 20 years. So we have SAP taking a look at that, looking at the money we've already invested in our reports and give us some sense of what it's going to take to convert our old technology reports to the brand new technology that we bought. It was an oversight by Black & Veatch. No one really knows why they didn't go ahead and load it, but they didn't, and it's what the Muni should be running on. So that's 120 hours there. So some of this is code language. Do you have any specific questions on this, anyone, rather than me going?
Is this backed up with a contract?
I have a contract. I have a draft contract. I wasn't going to hand it out because it's still in draft format, but it is backed up with a pretty substantial contract with a scope of work and laid out. We've been negotiating that scope of work for a couple weeks now.
Some of the intangible conversations specific to the action in front of the Assembly talks about, for example, ensure that the project is in alignment with the municipality's overall business scope and strategy. And I get that from maybe the web page. You can look at the departments and the structure and all the other stuff, but isn't that a less tangible duty and task than some of what you're looking at in the 18 or 17 modules?
I think that I wrote that, and what I was hoping is that they would see that the workflows that are embedded in those modules meet the business needs of the municipality. So that, let's take an example of approvals. In a workflow approval, accounts payable could have configured the system to be ratcheted down so that only accounts payable can authorize transactions that happen in a department. Well, that's not what we wanted. We wanted a department director to authorize the transactions that happen in a department. And we want accounts payable to certainly have an audit check, but we don't want them to hold up the business if the department director has said okay. Those kind of controls, the philosophy is that the departments have the budgets and the authority, so we want to push that authority out to those department directors.
Mm-hmm.
If we've configured the system too rigidly, we want to know
Well, that
about
would be the only opportunity. I would think maybe there's others that were this concern, which I have as well, that SAP is sort of auditing themselves. So the opportunity for them to say, well, you didn't get that module, or if SAP has to provide additional product support, this is how much it's going to cost the municipality. So my concern is that we sort of open the door to critiques. So, well, if you want the system to do that, we did that in San Diego, it cost you a couple $1 million, SAP can do that. Do you see that happening in this statement of work, or how much emphasis in the contract is what you just described?
Mr. Chairman, I believe they're going to take a very close analysis of what we have today.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to say, this is how you've configured it, and you've missed this configuration, and your testing is not robust, so if you go live, you're likely to have a high rate of error. It's really more technical about how have you configured your system and have you configured it so that when you push that button, it's going to work the next day. That's what we need to do.
What I want to do just for a minute is, and I'm purposely staying away from the policy call that was made some time back on choosing SAP or the implementation strategy or the other stuff, and I kind of want to head off a conversation, if there's one to be had, come Wednesday on this. We came, and I'll say dangerously close, I think, to stopping the whole process forward by not funding, the $3 million, or the debate we had with the $200,000, or even this debate with $750,000. So is it necessary from the Assembly's perspective to go back and revisit overall policy here? on the choice of SAP itself?
I don't know that that's helpful. I mean, we are where we are today. And so, you know, the concern that you raised, and it's one that I've been vocal about, if there is a void in what the SAP program does, and it's not delivering something we need it to deliver, I want to know that. And it's going to be very challenging because SAP is the one telling us.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, you have to take a leap of faith at some point and say, somebody's got to tell us where, you know, and I guess if it's not doing what we need it to do, we will find out. Lance, do you have any comments on that?
I think one of the things that's through the chair that's been discussed.
And I want to talk like this just for probably 10 minutes, so don't hurry. It's important, I want to get this out of the way if it's at all possible, so that
Right.
we can all vent or we can carry the conversation in the assembly as a greater whole.
So through the chair, in the past, there has been conversation just about, I think the concern you raised about whether or not it can do everything we want, and whether they're the appropriate people to tell us that. And, you know, clearly, again, SAP is a huge company. They have these different business arms. When we do business with one, we find out that we're not talking to the others. They don't talk to each other internally. So we're pretty confident that the folks who are offering these professional services in terms of audit and quality assessment really aren't sitting there talking with the licensing folks trying to figure out how to sell us more. I feel that, you know, basically, you know, this product is used all over the world. It's capable of, you know, without knowing all the details, it should be capable of meeting our business needs. It seems very unlikely that at this point in the process, anybody's going to come along and say, you know, gotcha, you know, if you wanted to do this, it's going to be that much more of a project. You know, the risk is always there, but, you know, we found as we go further and further along that the things that we discover are just smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So overall, you know, I'm comfortable with the idea that these people are going to review the configuration that's been laid out for us. They have an understanding, they do public sector projects, they have an understanding of what our end goal is, and they should be able to tell us, you know, if there is some glaring thing that, you know, that hasn't been done right in terms of how the system's been set up.
Okay, we hope so. And I'm going to default, Elvie did mention, but Mr. Michaelis, you have probably a little bit more government experience in your military in particular, where you had contractors, and I don't want to say that this is my observation, but I suspect you came across times where the auditing arm was also either the implementer arm or the person you bought systems from in the past. Have you had guidance here for us in this conversation as it relates to SAP being the auditor?
Sir, I don't know if I have guidance, but I've had experience in what you just said. And a lot of times you really do have to rely on the vendor who's the expert on the product. And you know, one of the things that I noticed in this organization, and you'll find it also in an awful lot of government contractors, they have a separate arm. And you know, in the military, you know, you have like the IG, the Inspector General. Well, in an awful lot of these big corporations, and to include those that do work for the military, they have a separate branch. And that separate branch is the kind of go-to branch that goes in there and sorts out what went wrong. Is the product, in fact, the right product for their needs? And, you know, can we deliver?
Yeah.
And so an awful lot of times you have to rely on these folks because they have all the expertise.
Have you had a chance to see the contract?
Kate and I have talked about it. We've talked about, I haven't read the actual scope, but she and I have talked about some of the things that needs to be in it to make sure that we're
I
protected.
think
here.
you'll sign it.
Well, no, I know Mr. Michaelis typically has a good handle on that, so I would hope that before he does sign it,
Yeah,
it sort of
of course.
aligns with the goals and mission statements and has the protective elements in there, if there is any of those that you know work.
Sure.
You know, such as that. I mean, we've had other companies that have had to report directly to the assembly or to the city manager on, sometimes that goes well, sometimes it doesn't go very well. You know, and so I guess I had that observation because I think this isn't the first time we've had to have that close association with a vendor/auditor.
And then the other thing too is they're no different than any government, you know, defense contractor. They want a good reputation because they want to keep selling their goods. And so it would behoove them, I would think, staff and make darn sure that, you know, they give us the right recommendations going forward.
The last question for you is, it seems like a fair amount of money. Is it typical, I mean, I know it's a lot of money, is it typical that that's what you do? You compensate them at levels so much, or has there been more of a helpful attitude that says, hey, we're all in this together, we want to get this thing implemented just like you do? $250,000 to move a product that we've already bought to market, or to use rather, is $750,000 seems to be a startling number for a company that would want to help us.
So I've seen that number and I've heard that number before, but this is the first time that I've actually seen how the allocation of those costs are being assessed. And I do know that it takes an awful lot of time to go into these systems and just make sure and you know, go from point A all the way through the system to make sure every single node links up with the other node. And we have a more complicated system because, you know, we got Telestat, you know, we have Konos, we have PeopleSoft. So all of these things have to work together with SAP. So I don't think the hours looked out of reason. And I see here that what they're doing is they're actually putting experts in each one of these areas. At least that's what I'm assuming.
Is that right, they equate into people?
Each one of these items is a person.
So it doesn't seem, for the number of hours, it doesn't seem out of line.
Did you have something to add, Elby? I know I distracted you a little bit, but I wanted to get some of that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, you did. Definitely a little bit.
Specific to the conversation that is SAP the right choice
But,
for two things. Did we buy the right program, and now are we going down the right policy call to let them, quite honestly, they are helping us. Obviously, that's why we've asked them to.
If you allow me to finish,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I was refreshing with the question.
No, I didn't forget the question.
Okay.
I just got thrown off track because you allowed Mr. McKay to go ahead of me, but that's okay. No problem there. But anyway, I think at this point, that for the assembly to, through a vote, to say, well, no, let's just trash this and throw it out, we need to start all over again, would be really, really premature. I mean, we have two reviews happening, one audit for $750,000, another one for $200,000, and I'm really hopeful that between the two of them, somebody will come back and say, okay, there are some real serious issues, and you have a choice in the matter. It's either going to cost you this amount of money to move forward, or to start from scratch, and then the decision will be up to the assembly. So, but I'm hopeful that we can come to some reasonable conclusion without the anticipation of a whole lot more money, and so we can move on and get this system in place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What about the conversation with SAP being the auditing company? Are we past the initial purchase discussion? Dick, obviously we are. I mean, unless we are. You know, we're down the
The
road.
only question is for Kate. Gabe, have you talked to Peloton about this? And that having SAP come in, is that going to delay Peloton's progress to get this system working? Is it going to violate our contract with them at all? Because if we're delaying them getting the system working.
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, there will be a period of 3 weeks where everybody, many people on the project, including Peloton, are focused answering questions.
If
But-
Peloton knows about this?
Oh, yes, they've been informed from all along. We're not auditing Peloton because I think Peloton's configuration is in part a result of the design of the system. And Peloton came in as a rescue agent, did a bid, and then found out that a substantial portion of the system they thought was designed was not designed. And so I think Peloton's probably done the best that they could on this project, but we need an independent view to make sure that it's been configured properly. And some of that is going to be a review of Peloton's configuration. But we need to know that this thing, when you push the on button, is going to work. And
Because we're paying Peloton, what, $500,000 a
you pay
month
them
right now?
$500,000 a month.
I just want trying to figure out if this is going to delay that and cause more money to have to be put towards their getting the system working.
Very likely, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Trainee, when the audit is being done, the work progress is going to slow down.
Yeah, that's a little bit off track from the point of what I want to kind of get behind us in terms of that.
Oh, so I was gonna say this, just finish my thought, was, I think, the conclusion many of us have come to is it would be, there's two different factors at play here. One is the configuration and how it worked. The other is, do we have enough staff? Are we putting enough human resources to implement this project, right? So there are two different things. The management review, that type of stuff is gonna look at that human capital resource. And I think many of us, I won't speak for anyone else, but I think I agree, and I've said from the beginning, I think there's no question SAP has good things to offer. There's no question they have a level of expertise. It's their own product, right? So there's definitely value in things that they can offer to bring to this project to understand what happened and how to go forward. My biggest concern was, what if the product's deficient? Well, we know. And I don't think there's any way to get around that concern. We just have, that's one of those things we have to potentially just accept and move on and utilize those other pieces of knowledge that they have. My hope after listening to Lance is if in fact there is a deficiency in the product, we will find out. But I think as I'm looking at it, now that I have the independent view looking at it, I'm far more comfortable going on with the second piece because I think both of them actually will marry together to give us a full story to make sure we have a clear path forward. Not just, here's the software, because they can tell us what's going on with the software and why, what are the hiccups. If we don't deal with the problem, or the issue of, do we have enough people basically to implement it, you have to have both. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I get that, and there's some opinion in whether or not our own talented staff isn't living up to the job or not. I don't want to go down that debate.
I don't mean that at
Yeah.
all, but sometimes what I am hearing from departments is sometimes we have somebody who does this job over here, and now they've been put over here to basically implement grants or something, and they have no clue what they're doing. And it's not their fault, it's just that it's not their area of expertise. So the independent audit is going to address a lot of those issues, but I think we definitely need a software expert to be able to tell us basically what's going on with the actual configuration. And, since we have that independent audit and it's been approved and that's moving forward, I'm far more comfortable being able to take, what's the word? It's kind of like, it's a known risk.
Yeah, well, you can certainly, and I'm not to cut you off, I think that drifts a little bit farther away from the opportunity to criticize the relationship with SAP and the formal take. I think you justified clearly why we're going down that road.
Well,
I
right.
still want to focus in on,
Well, and I'm saying-
is SAP, do we run a risk of using SAP into the final outcome that we all desire?
Well, and that's what I'm saying. To me, it's a known risk. It's something, if we decide to do it, it's something we're doing it with the full knowledge that there's other things that possibly, that they bring a value, but it's.
Get that.
Yeah.
Ms. Tucker, legally, do you see any, I hate to bring the port issue into it as well, but the CH2M Hill oversighting the VECO performance prior, and is there similarities here that we want to hear about? It's not taking too long here, but do you have legal concerns that we would implement a contract to the same person who bought the software from?
I don't, as it's been described here, and we want to make sure that that's reflected in the contract, and I have confidence that that's how that would
Okay.
come about, because as you've talked about here, this isn't, the purpose of this isn't an audit of the fitness of SAP to match what the city was looking for. That decision was made, in a previous situation. And in terms of the port, it's not quite, I understand the headache and the concern. The analogy isn't quite the same, because in the port, you did hire somebody to go back and audit and find out, and then it turned out that one of the responsible parties that audit discovered turned out to be a company that in the
I
interim,
get it.
your very auditor had purchased, and so it created that
That's
kind
a
of a
fair
situation.
answer, so different conversation. Any input on that specific SAP choice and the policy calls up to date, men, that you want to put on the conversation?
Not really.
No?
to get permitted.
Go ahead, Dick.
I've got a question for Kate and for Lance. Kate, initially, you told us we were about 20 people shy what we needed to implement this. And Lance has been telling us we need more staff. Are we going to wait until after this audit's done to hire the people, or are we moving forward to hire the staff we've already identified needs to be hired?
Through the chair, I believe that the Assembly approved 5 additional positions inside the Muni. And I think those are ongoing. I'm not sure how many have been filled, but Tom would be able to give you.
We had 3 payroll, we have 1 filled, 2 are open right now. It's not a biggest concern because right now the payroll module doesn't need people. Like the people that are on there, at least we're being told that they're not ready for it yet, so we haven't put them behind. We do have other people. If payroll needs somebody immediately, we have other staff we can send up there while we're backfilling these 2 positions that are currently open.
Now, I'm going to stop because I want to get back on the topic, because I think there is more to say as specifically relates to how the QA audit will be. You've already discussed that there'll be a slowdown. You anticipate people being sort of distracted from all of that. And Mr. Train's question is helpful to have that conversation out there, is that, you know, if in fact you feel like 20 people will fast track the implementation schedule, it would seem to be that. What is the relationship between the deliverables on the product that we're talking about here, the 750, if you understand my question here? This is in your opinion, going to do what? The audit is going to turn into 20 things that we got to do, and then we can implement on this date. If you follow all those, what do you feel like this is going to do? I know it's a hard question to say, well, why is he even asking that? What's your expectation this is going to do for you when the audit plan or the audit quality is delivered?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not really sure why the implementation is taking so long.
Okay.
I don't know what, and I don't know that the system has been configured to optimize the efficiency and effectiveness once it goes online. I can't tell you that that it has been, because it's been, it was a recovery operation, and those are challenging in itself, and then it's a recovery operation's had an extended life.
And so to answer the second part of the question is obviously then you would feel that the burden of the action plan, a way forward, if you will, I don't like that term, but how we're going to get to the next level of implementation is going to be suggested through a roadmap.
What we will get out of the audit is a specific identification of the gaps that exist right now in our configuration, and the gaps that may exist in the testing that we've done that show we have to go back and retest, or we have to improve our scripts. It also will lay out for us a schedule, and that's, for me, after all of this data is collected, SAP is required to prepare a schedule for us that identifies the things that we need to do, and also looks at the greater schedule and says, okay, Philo is going to take 9 more weeks. Here's what you need to do to get it. And that ties into the resources, okay? So we have these additional tasks that weren't in our schedule, that need to be in our schedule. How are we ever going to get those done in this period of time? And then we look at the resources and say, we need to backfill 14 positions in accounting. So right now, we don't really have a plan for you. There's really no plan that I would feel comfortable signing off on and saying to you, I'm putting myself behind this. And I think everybody needs to have something like that, and this audit will provide that.
Well, back to the realities of funding, and I saw your question, Ms. Gray Jackson, but I think the realistic perspective that Mr. Trainee started to launch on is we're paying Peloton $500,000 a month, and you're now proposing that this is going to be a stand down potentially of some of the ongoing forward labor of 3 weeks. Is that fiscally smart?
Through the chair, Mr. Stark, you've spent about $25 million on outside consultants, roughly, maybe a little bit less. But if we don't have a pathway forward that's very clear, I'm worried that we'll be inefficiently spending money for much longer. So I think you're investing a lot of money, and almost $1 million between both audits, to kind of right the ship and understand how fast it's going to move forward and what it's going to take in terms of when to push those sales ahead. And that's desperately what I think this project needs. But Glenda Gibson is here, and she's the Philo person, and Ann is the project manager. And I think it'd behoove you to hear from them rather than some spokesperson.
Specific to scheduling or task at hand? I have some other comments.
Specific to the overall, where they think the system is and what they think it needs, because I really am the mouthpiece for the project.
Yeah, I don't want to expand that necessarily right now because, again, we're asked to what the assembly needs to do come Wednesday, and that's either give you the 750,000 or whatever. They may have opinions in my observation, but I also gave the premise, I know everybody hates to do it in terms of the interruption, but speak up, Ms. Gray-Jackson. I don't have any trouble interrupting
Thank
any
you,
of
Mr.
us.
Chairman. I just like an orderly meeting. But anyway, again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make one point in terms of resources. We've already approved positions, but keep in mind for the 2015 budgets, there's, I think, 6 positions, some between finance and ER for this project also, that we're going to approve through the budget, 2015 budget process.
That are already in the proposed.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What'd you say, Dick?
Nothing.
As to note, Kate said, we spent $25 million on outside consultants.
Well, that's the whole process is based on that.
I know, but I just wanted to record that down.
You want to kind of
I'll
come
use
up
it
with,
later for something else.
It's roughly around.
bring in the in-house dollars, Dick, and then you can add the two together. Keep going specific as it relates to deliverables, the schedule, and then I also want to talk about when do we have the opportunity to interpret the data? Not from an assembly perspective, unless that's your recommendation, but where's the ongoing decision-making besides just you? Do you have a municipal team that you will run the findings by? Do you anticipate deliverables back to the audit committee? What do you want us to do next? And then where does that time frame come into play?
What we anticipated was during the audit, there'll be meetings with the project team. Many of them are here, and answering questions. And when we are done and we have a document, the deliverable is I think 3 documents. It's an executive summary, it's a detailed technical analysis of what's missing, where are the gaps. It's probably going to be, I don't know, 100 pages long. And then there will be a schedule. And the schedule will follow very closely behind the list of gap items. The schedule is going to be in Microsoft Projects form, and it will identify at the task level what needs to be done.
Developed by them or you?
Developed by us in conjunction with them. So they can't possibly do that in isolation. They would have to work with Ann very closely with Glenda and Lance to develop a schedule.
And assuming the assembly takes action on Wednesday, what does that look like from the schedule?
We sign the contract after legal reviews, maybe Friday, and then they deploy people for 3 weeks. They're on the ground, 18 consultants for the month of December.
Through the holidays?
They probably are here the first week of December and then stay for 3 weeks and then probably take off. We have a requirement that once they land here, they stay here. We're not flying people back and forth. So they're here and they're deployed for 3 weeks. The guys who are here for 4 weeks, they can go home on time. That's it.
So you would anticipate having at least a determination of what's wrong by the end of December?
That's correct. And they recognize the schedule is aggressive, and they're deploying the resources accordingly. We also have an opportunity to review all of the resumes of the people who are coming, so we're sure we're getting high quality people.
I don't have anything else that I'm kind of fostering a conversation. Was there outstanding issues? Amy, does it, your opinion, I know I was going to stay away from it, does it, it's assuming the $200,000 study on the managerial side, does this add value to that?
Yes.
And the $3 million that we approved at the last assembly meeting pays for all of this?
Mr. Chairman, $200,000 was funded from a fund balance and $750,000 was funded from the borrowing that you approved.
The line of credit appropriation or authorization?
That's right.
And how do we pay that back?
That's paid back through depreciation and IGC charges from IT once the system is in place.
Any concerns financially, Ms. Craig Jackson? You've been kind of quiet on how much this is all costing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like a little bit more of an explanation on how we're going to pay it back, because you said through IGC charges, and that's a little confusing to me.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Ray Jackson, what happens with the costs in this project is that they are capitalized into the capital fund, the IT. I look at Lance because he's in charge of that, but then they are charged out through IGCs to all the various entities.
Okay, because it's a master lease, so, and that's why.
Master tax lease payments are budgeted through debt. I have, you know what, I
Yeah,
have to ask. I have
Yeah,
to go back
because
and
when,
check that
because
out.
it is budgeted through debt, and when I
Right.
heard the IGC, situation, I'm like, okay. And so I think my next question is, what's our interest rate?
I think it's like 4% on the master tax lease. I'm pretty sure it's quite low. It might be a little less than that, but I can ask Ross to get you an exact number. I don't think we've signed the lease yet,
Okay,
so, but we'll know at that point.
okay, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, typically, and I'll suggest it again, that we don't take a formal voting position on it. I try to stay away from those, from the subcommittee work and the committee work that we do. And I'm going to suggest that again, but I don't necessarily need that to be the rule. If there's a need to bring a recommendation forward to the assembly, I don't know what that would look like today. Do we take a formal position of support or not? It's a dangerous place to go because we're not really a committee. We don't typically take direct actions, and I would be bound to say that as a representation of the committee come Wednesday. And I certainly have committee chair role responsibilities, but I'm still personally, and I'll just speak clearly as to not being the chair, I still have some challenges. Is this the right thing to do right now? And again, it would be nice to know some of the pressure points. Could it be resolved a different way? Is there a different strategy we could take beyond all this? But I also recognize the legislative branch versus the executive branch and who that is. That's part of the reason why I'm not bringing too much more of the discussion in there. If you guys aren't in consensus, that's really not our problem. You guys have to sort that out as an executive work team to agree or disagree outside of our role. So, do we need to say things beyond that? It was partly an information gathering things. What do I say to the assembly body on Tuesday or Wednesday if somebody asks?
Sorry about that.
If somebody asks the recommendation of the committee. My answer would be we don't have a formal recommendation by the committee. We talked about several things. Kate, you'll probably have to address the assembly again on Wednesday. I don't know quite what the answer would be in terms of support or not from the committee.
So I've never been an assembly member and probably never ever will be one. But it would seem to me that one of the things that the rest of the assembly may be looking forward to is some type of guidance from this committee since we took it up. One of the things you could do, instead of saying that we had a formal position, you could say if there's consensus, and see if you have consensus to go forward with some type of a recommendation regarding using SAP. And so it would be a formal recommendation, it needs to be a consensus you could hold, see where you think folks are.
Well, the absence of a big debate on the earlier question that I asked would probably say that, and not to disagree with you on that. The reason that somebody might vote no on it might be cost, or in my case, is this what we want now? Meaning we haven't even dealt with any implementation challenges yet. We haven't kicked the switch off, and now we don't know what's not working. So I would verbalize other concerns beyond just, is SAP the right choice? So I thought that the conversation earlier about the question specific to SAP would have answered, is this the right company to choose? I still have personally other challenges that I'll work through between now and Wednesday on it. So, I'm not certain that what I heard today is overly challenging. And it certainly wasn't an interest to delay the question in front of the assembly. It was really, I think, to do this, which was provide a bigger opportunity. I think it's been helpful for Kate in the last week and a half to kind of get get the conversation rolling with herself, you know, talking to yourself at home, going, what do I do, you know? And then also bringing these guys up to speed from a kind of a what do we do next perspective. So I'm back to the question. I wouldn't know what to ask. You know, do we agree formally that $750,000 is the right amount of money to spend on a product, and would we vote yes on it come Wednesday? I'm still hesitant to put that question in front of the committee.
Mr. Chairman, I have one comment, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay. First off, the Municipal Audit Committee is the only committee that's required by municipal code. It's in the code, so we are a real committee, if you will.
Right.
Okay, and I believe that because we are a formal committee, that it is appropriate to have a motion and a second and a vote of the committee to, and then bring that recommendation based on the committee's review to the body as a whole. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it is, and I guess you've been on a lot of committees. The challenge I have with it is that it's an assembly decision, and the committee's not made up of just assembly.
Well, and I could say too, yeah, that's true, but I think in this is such an important topic. I think the assembly will look at the audit committee as the body or the individuals that have vetted this topic probably more so than anyone else. And, you know, they are, I think, just as Mr. Fernandez said, I think they're probably going to be looking for guidance from us. I'm sorry, did you have something? Go ahead. I didn't really have a good, go ahead.
Just to help focus, you know, one of the things that you spoke about was that part of the discussion here was on a more limited issue, which was sort of brought up about whether there were, you know, at the full assembly level, about the potential of there being a conflict or getting into a situation analogous to the port, and trying to avoid it, where what was the relationship between having SAP come in and were they doing an audit of SAP, and you sort of have straightened that out quite a bit here, I think.
Yeah, no, I know why we sent it to committee come last week, and so you're right.
Right, so part of what goes, I think, should be included in what goes back to my counsel would be what goes back to the assembly, at least covers that you discussed that question, and that there is consensus as, at a minimum, as under what Mr. Michaela said, as to whether that represented a conflict, and then explain what was discussed at the committee and why that's not an issue. So at least you're narrowing the number of sort of red herring issues and confusion that comes down. So at a minimum, I think that would be very helpful for the rest of the assembly, and in line with what you're being counseled by other committee members, is saying, you know, they're going to, you know, we meet for a reason here, or you know, the committee meets as a reason.
Yeah, well, the only question I can bring in front of the committee is do we make a recommendation to support the $750,000 appropriation? And that would be the only question that I would want to bring in front of the body. So I'm happy to do it if you guys want to treat it more formal than I'm used to. I don't say I'm against it. It's just I have to speak to that come Wednesday based on, as Ms. Tucker said, the bigger thing which happened here.
Well, another question would be that you brought it in front of the committee, and it was referred to the committee because of this question about, you know, of various aspects of the question about the appropriateness of an SAP contract as opposed to endorsing going forward, and so that you have a consensus that, as far as, if you do have a consensus, the question that you bring here can at least include if you have a consensus that that using SAP for this audit isn't a conflict. That doesn't say that everybody is going to be, as you pointed out, in favor of spending $750 or doing the audit, but at least in terms of whether it's a conflict to go with SAP, so that you get consensus on what you're comfortable with, and you report that out. So that, because what I hear you saying is that you don't want to be binding everybody at the committee on a committee recommendation that would need to cover many more aspects than what you have looked at today.
Right. And that's typically why I don't vote in committee, is because, you know, what we try to do is focus on the question at hand. You know, do we get a sense that you know, Kate's got got a good, I mean, I get more out of the committee than just the questions and the data. I mean, it's your comfort level, we talk outside of committee, you know, so personally, I get a lot of other data than just, you know, the specific question that I ask.
Well, I would say, when I'm thinking about this, I think the question for me is there value in this proposed $750,000 audit of the configuration? And to me, that answer is yes. Then I look at the other part of it, that I do, is there value in SAP themselves doing an audit of this product and this configuration? I think the answer is yes. Because they know their product better than anyone else. But do I also recognize that SAP is auditing their own product? Yeah, is there a little bit of concern? Or is there some concern about, like I said, that gap maybe that potentially exists? There is. But the question in my mind is, does the value they bring to the table outweigh the concern or the potential for that void being there? And that's the question, and I think there's no question there's value to what they bring to the project.
Yeah, that's a question, again.
But that's what I mean.
You just illustrated my challenge.
I was trying to go back to the 3 or 4 questions.
You're
So
right.
I'm already on my 3rd or 4th. So when I say I'm already on that one. So that's why I go back to it and I say, I recognize that. I've had concerns about it. I vocalized it many, many times. No question. But in my mind, there's no question we need some sort of audit on the configuration. I think that's a huge part of it, and I don't think we can move forward on this project without it. It doesn't.
Well, certainly Kate can. She's made that very clear, and
Yeah.
she's the one that does it. So
that's why,
it's obvious.
So for me, from an audit perspective, I recognize we need. I believe we need something like this. Has the independent audit with this together. Does that alleviate some of my concerns about SAP being there? Yeah, it does alleviate some of my concerns. Is it still there? Yeah, it's still there. But I know we have multiple people that are watching for that. And it gives me great confidence that Mr. Vakela said he'd make sure to protect us, and when he's looking at the contract to make sure there's certain things in there that's going to protect the municipality.
He said he'd guarantee successful implementation too. I heard him say it.
I didn't quite hear that.
Did you want to add something?
I do want to add something. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say thank you, Mr. Bosky. I really appreciate your comments, okay? And as everybody knows, I didn't vote for the $3 million. And I'm not sad about the fact that I didn't vote for the $3 million. We've had some really intimate conversations, public but intimate conversations about this whole issue. And initially, my thoughts were, and still to some extent, SAP auditing their own product. But reality is, they're not auditing the software, they're auditing the implementation of that software. And so I feel a little more comfortable in that respect. But also, if we weren't having an independent review done at the same time, there's no way I would be in support of this, absolutely none. But because we are having an independent review done at the same time, I am way more comfortable than I've ever been, frankly, on this whole project. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I don't know how you're going to go forward now, but anyway, uncomfortable at this point.
Yeah, Mr. Hall, you can add something as an outside observer. Sure.
Yeah, I will. Number one, I wish we were having this conversation when we went from Black and Beach to Peloton rather than now.
I was thinking the same thing.
I think it would have made a huge difference. And, I acknowledged at the time that Mr. Gray Jackson and Mr. Trainee had come with that recommendation, and we chose not to go that way, and it was probably an error. It was an error. But with that considered, I think it's the right conversation. It's a little late, but it's the right conversation. As a member of the Assembly, I would appreciate the committee bringing to me a recommendation that evening, which would be, I keep thinking one of your members will make a motion and kind of take it out of your hands.
They will.
I would like to see, I would really like to hear that motion be not for $750,000, but up to $750, with a hope that, maybe when we get into here, some of this is in better shape than we think, and it's going to take the hours that are reflected here. So we might be able to bring it in under budget and ahead of time. I don't know, but I would be very comfortable as a member of the body if you, after having heard all of the discussion and the conversation, actually give me some direction and help me make that decision.
Well, as long as the conversation is supported, you guys speak very eloquently with that. You know, there's times to say yes, no, otherwise, I mean, how we got where we are, ultimately it just comes to pushing the button. So the idea that you know, the committee work has largely been done not only today, which is helpful, but I know you guys have been working hard on the conversation, a lot of other aspects, and Kate's been gelling it, and you know, so I'm comfortable from the way it's progressed to do that. Does the crescendo have to be a vote? I don't mind taking one. I certainly would think that's the case. It helps us all speak clearly to why we push the button that we do.
Bill, I'm not on your committee, but it would be nice if Amy or Ellie would bring a recommendation forward to the Assembly on this item.
Well, I don't mind
Those
bringing
who are
it
on the
forward.
committee, use your chair and let them do the work.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion, just as Mr. Hall stated, for the Assembly to approve a sole source purchase of professional services from SAP to perform quality assurance up to the amount of $750,000.
That's fine, I second that. It's 11A on our agenda, so that's basically to rephrase the question from the Assembly, except with the up to perspective, but I don't have any trouble with that. Did you get all that?
I hope I said it right.
Yeah. And there's 6 of us on the committee.
Yeah,
so,
can you vote?
Yep.
Aye.
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 And I'm a nay.
Could you do a roll call vote on this, please? Start,
We
we
did
have
on
to
the
say
tape.
their name and then how they vote.
I'm Kate Guyard, I vote yes.
Tom Fink, I vote yes.
Amy Vitofsky, and I vote yes.
Elby Gray Jackson, yes.
George McGillis, yes.
Bill Starr, I vote nay.
And is Mr. Raskins on this committee?
No.
Okay,
No, I think you heard from us all.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I can certainly start the conversation off under committee reports, but I'm likely to not. I'm likely to defer the committee report to the action item on 11A. So does anybody have an opinion on how we distribute that?
I think that's a really good
Okay.
idea, Mr. Chairman.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
I think one advantage is 2 Fridays ago when we all met, there were 3 other Assembly members here. So I think, and Kate did this big chart and kind of explained really in detail what was going on. And I think you'll be surprised. I think most of the Assembly members are pretty much up to speed, kind of like you are today. It was kind of even more detailed. Couple.
Sure, it was. That's why we didn't recreate it today.
Right.
It was on purpose.
So I'd be surprised if there's a lot of discussion, but I don't know.
Are we done with this topic? Can I move on?
We are.
Okay, so I want to go back to the $200,000 audit that was there, because we had, while we were developing the scope of work, we being Ms. Gray Jackson, myself, the CFO, and the auditors, one of the things that I don't know, we had made discussion about, and we said we would bring it up at the audit committee, but for this independent review, we had talked about actually naming a contract administrator. Do you remember that, Kate? And it was our belief that it should be the internal auditor, Ms. Raskin.
We've done that before.
Yeah, so I think we were going to actually formally make that recommendation at this committee.
Let's let Mr. Raskin speak to that. You know what we're talking about?
Yes?
Any trouble? You're good at it, so.
Well, I'm a good assistant too.
Anybody have a resistance to that? Does everyone know what she's talking about?
Right, just as a correction, on page 2, item C, Chief Fiscal Officer, just add an R. I read the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I'll just give you this.
Certainly package that. I don't have a copy of it, so.
Yeah, but other than that, I think that, you know, we spent quite a bit of time developing this on Friday, I think it was, Mr. President. And I think it's a really good product, and it's going to enable us to move forward sooner than later.
Okay, plan on getting the RFP prepared today or tomorrow and putting it on the street. This will be a competitive process on this one. And I guess we could put up here, in here also, up to $200,000 versus the 200. I think it's a good idea.
So, Mr. Michaelis, when that actually occurs, Kate, you probably know the answer too, does Mr. Estes actually sign the contract then? Or is he noted as a player?
No, I sign it, but he is the contract administrator.
Okay, fair enough. Enough guidance, Mr.
Actually,
Dombrowski?
I think when we were discussing it, because we were going to have the chairman of the assembly sign this contract.
Sign it? Okay,
Because,
that's fine.
Mr. Michaelis, we wanted you actually to be on the selection committee.
The RFP review committee.
So that was the reason we didn't want you to sign this contract. We'd rather have the chairman of the assembly, being it's an independent audit, we didn't really
Yeah,
want
if
him.
this is an assembly audit, then
It
someone
is.
on the assembly should sign
Yeah.
it.
Thanks.
Ms. Jones?
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I think you should probably check with Mr. Haddon about that. Mr. Haddon and I have gone around in circles about whether or not the chair of the assembly can sign contracts for the assembly. There is some specific guidance that the chair can, of course, sign a legal contract, but as to other contracts, we've gone back and forth, and there are times where they've allowed that, and other times where they've insisted that the municipal manager needs to sign that.
I get that. My question was specific to Ms. Goreston's role, so I didn't want to defer that into
We
who
can have
actually.
that conversation. Ron wasn't there, but he did have,
Staff person there.
Esther. Yeah, Dave was there on his behalf, and that we did have that discussion, and they were thinking it would be Patrick, but either way, we just want to make sure it's an independent audit. And as Ms. Gray Jackson so eloquently said, that's the reason some of us are more comfortable, even though maybe we didn't vote for the $3 million, we were more comfortable moving forward because we do have independent eyes on it, but we just want to keep that independence. So, thanks.
And the contract administration question is what you brought to this committee. That's why I
And
brought
that's why-
comments on that. So
We go
I
back
didn't
to-
particularly hear who signs the contract.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're good for our money, but I think the question I had was if Mr. Rasmussen signed it, then we compromise his role a little bit more as just being named inside the
Yeah,
contract.
we really want him to be administrator because we want an independent, voice. So that's kind of what we were thinking.
Who does the final presentation then on your product?
Well, it would be.
The person we select?
Yeah.
Okay, so not Ms.
It's in
Rasmussen.
Just to follow up, if I may, Mr. Chairman, really quick, just so this committee knows, and you as the chair, we even established an RFP review committee to review the RFP. We got that far, and that committee is Ms. Dombrowski, myself, Mr. Michaelis, Ms. Yard, and then somebody from internal audit.
I feel
So we
slighted
have-
I wasn't asked.
Well, we didn't think you'd be interested.
I was
so-
also out of town and you're in a hurry, so.
But anyway, we're moving forward.
Okay,
So so I think what you'll have to do to clean it, to make it clean, if in fact the chair of the assembly is going to sign it, then it probably needs to be funds appropriated by the assembly. So that means it would probably need to be in the assembly budget, okay? See what I mean? Because what happens is, if, right now, the money that we'd be using has already been appropriated for the administration to do.
I don't think so. The resolution, the money in this budget.
Yeah.
Oh, it is,
Yeah, that's-
then that's all the more reasons why the
Yeah.
assembly chair should sign it.
We've done that.
Yeah,
But
okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, okay.
Did you have something to add, Mr. Train?
Nothing's there.
I cut you
We're-
off twice
we're
on
good.
purpose.
No, I'm fine.
We worked really hard at making sure everything was independent. And
Yeah, well, that makes sense. If it's in the assembly budget, then the assembly chair should sign.
Absolutely.
Any other committee work? I like this thing.